Okay, hi everybody at Church Universal and Triumphant. Namaste. This is Ben Turner, brother in Holy Orders. I'm a member of Order of the Diamond Heart and also a member of Order of St. Joseph. And I'm looking online for some information so that I can uh, present to everyone what I've called over the intervening week or two since I last posted. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about the different kinds of Buddhism, and I promised to explore that more thoroughly. I have a general understanding, and I just want to clarify that at CUT we are our own path, but we are also the integration of 8 different mystical paths. So it's not standard religion as you would find in the standard churches, but rather the mystical paths in each of those religions. So, for instance, I'm 1/8 Islam, and people at CUT are as well, but it's Sufi Islam. It's Sufism that we follow, and it's the mystical form of Christianity that we follow. Additionally, and there are 8 chakras in the body in our teaching. That differs a bit from the many of the Hindu teachings in which there are hundreds of chakras in the body, and then I think it's even 2 exterior to the body, according to the teaching. There are chakras above you as well, and I can talk to you about those down the line, but basically there are 8 total, 7 standard, and then the heart is actually 2-chambered. There's a secret chamber in the heart, so that's the 8th chakra, which is the first of the 5 secret rays. But Buddhism we're definitely Buddhist. My friend described us as being cosmopolitan, or as pursuing what is known as cosmopolitanism, and I think by that what he meant was, in a way, we have a very broad understanding of world religion, and so we do seek to, I believe, facilitate the development of religions, when people happen to be very involved or interested in becoming more spiritually progressed. For instance, I'm not as well versed in Vajrayana Buddhism as some practitioners would be. However, I have an utter respect for the faith and monitor it when I can. My form of Buddhism is very specific to my leader, who I believe is the messenger. And I'm not sure if Buddhists look to their leaders I don't know if that Buddhists consider their leader to be a messenger to the same extent that we do. I suspect that they are not. I shouldn't say that because I know that in Hinduism, at least, Nityananda's school, and I understand that Hinduism is a very broad term and really refers to many different religions, but I like to abbreviate it for the purpose of shortening that conversation where it's necessary to do so. I refer to most of the non-Buddhist, non-Muslim, non-Sikh, etc. religions within India as Hinduism, and the region as Hinduism, although it's not totally accurate, so you'll have to forgive me for doing that. But in Hinduism, the Nityananda adherents consider him to be a living embodiment of Shiva, so it is similar to that, except my theory is that Elizabeth Clare Prophet is really Brahma, okay? And that is something that I developed on my own after years of adherence and being a devotee for a very long time, and studying her work and the work of her husband, Mark Prophet, for a very long time. So I do believe that she is Brahma embodied, as opposed to some of the other great leaders, all of whom I believe are basically at the same level once they reach a certain stage of personal initiation. So, for instance, Nityananda, I believe, has the same general attainment as Yogiraj Sadhguru Nath Siddhanath, who is comparable to Sadhguru, and the list goes on. In my world, because of how I came up through the Buddhism that is unique to CUT, Mother is Brahma. So, as I was trying to explain to other people, I believe that Yogiraj at least would have an appreciation of this as well. Mother, there'll never be another initiating guru for me, so it will always be Elizabeth Clare Prophet who is first, because you can really only be baptized first, or you're only, I think, initially baptized in the Holy Spirit, if you will, one time, and then of course the world opens up for you. But there's always a point of initiation, and for me it was Mother Elizabeth Clare Prophet who opened the door on the path, and I don't think that is something that you can ever shut. I do believe she is the open door that no man can shut, in other words, and I'm not sure if the other adherents feel the same degree of intensity about their guru, their leader, with the exception of the people following Nityananda. In that instance, I do believe that they are in the presence of God, or that they believe that they're in the presence of God. That's kind of how I feel about Elizabeth Clare Prophet, except that I view Mother as being more like, I think that her presence is angelic. I think that it's also unique. I don't think that there will ever be another Elizabeth Clare Prophet. Even if one were to attain a higher level of karmic attainment, which I do believe is possible, she was the initiating guru who came in at a certain point in space-time where she was vitally needed and indispensable, and it occurred one time. Her entry into this realm occurred at a specific point in space-time and will never be repeated, even if she does bring Germain to a higher level of attainment that she herself achieved. There was only ever one Elizabeth Clare Prophet. So, and that feat, if you will, that feat of self-becoming will never be repeated. That's how I feel about my guru. And it is very intense and loving and, an ineffable level of respect. And I also think that the Babaji, for instance, Yogi Raj is like me in that he felt the same way about Babaji. If you got Yogi Raj started with regard to Babaji and how holy Babaji was and what a watershed event it was for Yogi Raj to have encountered Babaji, I think that he would never stop talking about it, and it's how I feel about Elizabeth Clare Prophet. Of course, you have to manage people's level of interest and so forth, but for me, Elizabeth Clare Prophet is like Babaji, and I think that, and I've studied the levels of attainment, and I believe that she was like a Jesus, an embodiment of Jesus, but, because she came in female form, I believe, I refer to her as Magda. I think that she was a living embodiment of Mary Magdalene, who was the twin flame to Jesus in many systems. We can debate whether or not Jesus was elsewhere attached romantically on a separate occasion. I have personal theories about that, which I've shared with some people very respectfully. But the twin flame, as with regard to attainment, male and female at the same level of attainment, it's Jesus and Magda who are the male and female counterparts. I believe that was Mother's role. Mother served as a living embodiment of Jesus, which is why she's guru, in other words. That's my personal opinion. And I have studied it, and I do believe that is consonant with the emerging theology and generally consonant with the will of the theological preferences of Margaret Elizabeth Clare Prophet as well. So, cosmopolitanism, yes, that's very interesting to have be viewed and quite an honor to be viewed as being able to extend a protective aegis around either forming NRMs or existing paths, like these very devoted Buddhists and people following the Dalai Lama and so forth. But I also want to emphasize that I still consider myself to be Buddhist, just 1/8 Buddhist, and it is a Buddhism that is characterized by the teachings of my guru, and they come from a specific lineage that includes the Theosophic and Gnostic lineages. And when you're in CUT, you're also quite Christian most of the time as well. Yes, you're studying Kabbalah and so on, but there's continuous talk of the Bible and Christianity within it. That makes it a little bit different from the other Buddhist paths, although I think that it's not appropriate to not view us as being Buddhist. But I wanted to... But I did want to make the distinction between being a church that is like which is fine if people benefit from that. I don't have a problem with that if people want to view us that way. A church that is akin to what's the word for it? That is more, I want to say curatorial, if that's the word. We curate. Yes, that's true. but when you're within CUT, you're not just looking out over the world and trying. You are looking at to try to understand what other people are following and believing. One, because it does help your own development to see that, even though it's not on your path and not necessarily part of Mother's teaching, to see what the Vajrayana Buddhists are doing, for instance, or the Nichiren Buddhists, the Japanese Buddhists. Right, study that to whatever extent you'd like to do so, even though it might have variant beliefs, and likely will have variant beliefs, because as I stated, the Buddhism from CUT in my lineage is different from the other forms of Buddhism. So there is that interest. There's certainly an interest in helping push religion forward, and as I said, providing curation for these different paths. But when you're within CUT, it's you love the Guru and you're as obsessed with the Guru, I believe, as the Buddhists and Hindus love their Guru and follow them, and follow the inner bell and inner awakening as well. Yes, I'm looking out for you. I'm looking out for for whatever path you're on, but I'm also following my own individual, not just individual religion, but the religion as it is handed down to me and through the other people in holy orders at CUT through progressive revelation. We're still being taught by Mark and Elizabeth, and by the masters. So, and we are a little bit different too in that I am activity and also considered to be an ascended master's church. So that does differ from Buddhism, although you will find a lot of our masters, quote-unquote masters, to be figures from Buddhism. Padmasambhava, for instance, who is the sponsor of Elizabeth Clare Prophet's guruship. So when I look at what to study next, I take hooks like that, where when I read that, or someone puts it in front of me and I can authenticate it and see it online, Padmasambhava, so that's the point of departure for me. What I want to do is to be able to generate interest in the other Buddhist paths by learning what I can a bit apart from typical Buddhism, and then bringing that into the Buddhist teachings for other paths, so that everybody can have access to what is found to be relevant. That was quite a gem when I found it, the Padmasambhava reference, because I knew that the teaching is that Mother established Church Universal and Triumphant actually through Jesus and Buddha, that they co-established it. So you're talking about a religion that presents itself to be the intersection of Christianity and Buddhism. So fascinating in the first instance, but she actually claims that it's Jesus and Buddha who founded the church in the 70s, okay? What I didn't know until later on, and had never known until I uncovered it and could authenticate it, was that Padmasambhava is considered to be the sponsor of her guruship. And so all that information is gorgeous and rich and fascinating when you uncover what Padmasambhava was all about. But getting back to the types of Buddhism, I did cover this in another video, so I don't mean to be repetitive, but I'm making this video specifically for my friend in Michigan. So I just want to make sure that we can attempt to utilize this video as a touchstone, maybe, because he's so very devout and involved on his path that I'm sure he has his own ideas. Let me take a look and see how people are defining Mahayana versus Vajrayana. Some people will believe, I'm certain, that Vajrayana is actually part of the Great Wheel, known as Mahayana Buddhism. It depends upon, your source. Let's see here. So, this is familiar to me. Theravada Buddhism, is one kind of Buddhism, Mahayana and Vajrayana, and just looking really quickly on Quora, that's the source here, those are the three main divisions, is what is stated, with Mahayana being referred to as the great vehicle. The Mahayanists actually call Theravada the lesser vehicle, and here it says that Vajrayana is an extension of Mahayana with tantric elements. So, as stated before, some people will see Theravada Mahayana and then Vajrayana as a kind of Mahayana. And other people will see Vajrayana as different enough to be a third division entirely. I think that pretty much sums it up. And of course, there's Nichiren Buddhism too, and they're not listing it here. And a lot of other kinds of Buddhisms, I'm certain, and quasi-Buddhist paths like Bon as well. And we'll discuss Bon down the line. Difference between Mahayana and Vajrayana. Difference between, there's actually a website called Difference Between. I think I'll go to Diamond Way Buddhism because that sounds authentic, right? Shining Mind of God, the Diamond Mind of God. This is actually, this is my friend's lineage right here, Karma Kagyu lineage, and you'll have to forgive my horrible pronunciation. Theravada is the school of the elders, so this is coming from Karma Kagyu. And let's see if I can actually get the actual pronunciation down. It could be Kagayu. I don't think it is, though. Pronunciation. He'll do it. Hang on one second. Thank you for bearing with me on this. I just like to know. I think we should all be as uncomfortable. Is it soft G? Kaju. Interesting. It's almost like a D, too. Interesting. Okay, so Karma Kaju. I wonder if I can challenge that. It's probably right. I would imagine that it's a soft C if that's how the man is pronouncing it. In any event, rather a soft G. Kaju. Okay. Okay, Whispered Transmission School. Okay, so this is my friend, and he claims that it's not Vajrayana. Here's another one. Okay. No, that's Chinese. Hang on one second. See, they're saying it's a hard G. Yeah, interesting. It's almost a K. In any event, so up to one's preference, right? Tibetan school, also known as the oral lineage or whispered transmission school, is today regarded as one of 6 main schools, with Nyingma being one, Himalayan, Tibetan Buddhism being a separate school, so they have a different theory altogether. It does say here that it primarily follows the Vajrayana or Tantric teachings based on the New Tantra, so it's a form of Vajrayana to the best, and he can debate this, and he's the expert. I don't have a problem with that at all. Like all schools of Tibetan Buddhism, the Kagyu consider their practices and teachings inclusive of the full range of Buddha's teachings, or 3 yana, since they follow the fundamental teachings and vows of individual liberation and monastic discipline. Those teachings in turn accord with a tradition of the Shravakayana, the Bodhisattva teachings, vows of universal liberation and philosophy of the Mahayana, and the profound means and Samaya pledges of the secret mantra Vajrayana. Due to the Kagyu's tradition's particularly strong emphasis on Guru devotion and Guru Yoga, that's how I proceed within CUT. Not all of the CUT adherents necessarily feel the same way. I will talk to you folks about that later because it's an interesting story. But I think that the White Fire Corps folks, the people who were there at the ranch, physically and etherically, understand why Mother is and what's central. But I can tell you my own anecdotes with regard to that. Due to the Kagyu tradition's particularly strong emphasis on guru devotion and guru yoga, and the personal transmission of esoteric instructions from master to disciple, the early Kagyu tradition soon gave rise to a bewildering number of independent sub-schools or subsects centered around individual charismatic Kagyu teachers and the hereditary lineages, as well as mind stream emanation lineages, which I believe that they're referring to something known as mind rolling when they say mind stream emanation, and we'll talk about that here as well. So you can scroll through. There's mind rolling listed. It's not spelled correctly, but it's listed here. Okay, so okay, that's very awkward for an English native English speaker to say. So I will say Dzogchen and just feel confident that that is entirely acceptable. Okay, so the Dzogchen teachings are neither a philosophy nor a religious doctrine nor a cultural tradition. That's a tall order to say that it's not a cult. How can it not be a cultural tradition? But let's take a look. Understanding the message of the teachings means discovering one's own true condition, stripped of all the self-deceptions and falsifications that the mind creates. That's interesting. This is on a blog, so any one of us, presumably someone who is schooled in Buddhism, put it up there. Another blog says, according to Tibetan Buddhism in Bonn, Dzogchen is the natural primordial state or natural condition of the mind, and a body of teachings and meditation practices aimed at realizing that condition. And then if we click through to study Buddhism, Dzogchen might have a reputation for being effortless. That I don't believe. But in order to practice it properly in the first place, we need to put in tremendous effort to understand what are known as the outer and inner preliminaries. With perseverance and wisdom, Dzogchen becomes an incredibly profound and effective method for achieving enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, which is familiar to me from typical Buddhism. One thing I find very useful in Buddhism is the notion of bodhisattva. As I stated before, some people believe that there's Theravada on one hand, Mahayana on the other, with Vajrayana a subset of Mahayana. There are two kinds of, depending upon the school to which you refer, and I would have to look it up. I think some Mahayana says one thing about bodhisattva, and maybe the Theravadins have a different idea of bodhisattva. But bodhisattva is when they say the benefit of all beings, it is like the Christian connection to the sacrifice, if you will, of Jesus. That's awkward because alchemically we really, it takes books and years of study to understand exactly what Jesus was all about, and whether or not how the agency of Jesus affected humanity and so on. So it's quote unquote sacrifice. That's an awkward way to describe his involvement with the planet, although it does add some degree of depth to the understanding. But what Christianity and Buddhism clearly have in common is that enlightenment, mystical Christianity, the pursuit of enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. So when I refer to staying behind, that is my teaching as well. A bodhisattva stays behind. A bodhisattva says, I won't contribute to I believe, and I don't know if this is the specific teaching within people who adhere to Dzogchen or not. I suspect that it is the Pure Land Buddhist teaching, or part of the Pure Land Buddhist teaching, but as I understand it from studying Buddhism and also from studying it from my guru, right, it's that you are willing, as many Christian people are, you are willing to hold the balance and bear the burden of the Sacred Heart of Jesus in your own life, make personal sacrifices in your own life. I believe that's, well, they are saying that by achieving enlightenment, it is for the benefit of all beings, which is the Bodhisattva path in my teaching on the matter. If you refer to my other videos, and I can provide you with links to those videos. I keep getting notifications, but I don't need to address those right now. We stay behind. We all stay behind so that someone else doesn't suffer, in other words. And then there's a final ascension at the end where I believe that it's really when it's the in-breath of Brahma, when everybody is unified for a short period of time before the universe explodes outward again, if you will. But what you wouldn't want to do, presumably, in religion, excuse me, is to, I don't know, create an underclass of people who are totally oppressed, or identify a group of people who aren't worthy of salvation, although I should present to you the caveat, and this is the teaching of Elizabeth Clare Prophet, by the way, and I think that it's very important to understand, and I do believe that this emanates from Pure Land Buddhism. The additional understanding is that not everybody wants to be saved right now. Some people need to be saved right now. Some people are on the path to liberation and must achieve it now. And it's not the fallen ones who always want liberation, irrespective of who they trample. Rather, these are bodhisattvas who need liberation now, and they need to do it through the proper channels. I agree with that, and I agree with leaving the fallen angels behind. I do agree with that, because I do believe that there's evil in the world personally. Some Buddhists don't believe that. Some Christians I know don't like to believe it, and there are some people at CUT who will even say the fallen angels aren't here anymore. I don't believe that at all. I do believe that there are evil people who are fallen in the world who need to be booted out, and I believe that it's time for the people who are done suffering or who need to obtain moksha, which is the release from samsara, which is the cycle of repetitions. Those people need to be liberated from the influence of the fallen angels in order to be able to achieve their, call it ascension, liberation, moksha. So the extent to which that's being taught here, I'm not sure, but it does say the goal is that achieving enlightenment benefits all beings. So, not mind over matter, but mind over, I would suspect, mind over mind is what's being taught here. Of course, this is very profound because it is all about thinking. A lot of you know, and people who want to be connected to my work should know that I'm a human rights lawyer, and I work to stop force and coercion in healthcare, which is a huge problem internationally, with local mental health tribunals trying to punish people, drag them out of their homes, and institutionalize them and so forth. My principal goal in life is to stop that. People should be free to choose their own path under all circumstances. But one thing I learned early on in studying mental training techniques was that you can control your emotions through thinking. So in other words, you don't have to wake up in the morning and be depressed because you can think your way out of it. Feeling your way out of something is not always the answer, because your heart and your brain, yes, they're integrated, but they're also separate. They also serve two separate functions. So if you wake up feeling brokenhearted, or you see something in the street that breaks your heart, the notion, or rather the response, if you don't want to be brokenhearted anymore, is to find a way to think yourself out of it. Yes, the pain might inspire you to help an individual who is injured, for instance, and it should in certain instances, but if you can't personally recover enough to extend a hand to that individual, then you're both two broken-hearted people. If you can be strong, you can lend a hand to assist that person and help that person bear the Sacred Heart. And you're being Christ-like in my school when you do that. But to achieve that, you have to think your way out of the pain. So you have to clear your heart and have your heart open to assisting and not be suffering in the moment in order to provide the solace and the assistance. And that is mind over, not matter, not mind over mind, but mind over heart, mind over emotion. You can control your emotions with your mind. That's one thing I took away from some weird training that I received about 20 years ago. It's I don't want to be depressed in this moment, ergo I'm going to think my way into a new thought, and I'm going to put a stop to my depression, or I'm going to stop feeling a certain way because I have mentally changed my emotional direction. So this is also a question of the mental faculties and the air, the spirit of the air coming to bear against the emotional world, and so on. Not that we shouldn't have emotions, because people would be. I don't agree with vulcanizing all of humanity, but it is something to be. One's emotional life is something to control through personal, individual self-direction. So what they're saying here is that really we have broken minds, and I think that what they mean is probably broken minds and emotion as well, but the mind, I'll read it. Dzogchen is a very advanced system of meditation on the deepest, subtlest foundational levels of mind. Mind refers to the unbroken mental activity of cognitively engaging with objects, described from another point of view as the mental activity of giving rise to appearances, to which they also refer as mental holograms, or at least in this writing. The term Dzogchen means great completeness, referring to the fact that all the qualities of Buddhahood are complete on the level of Rigpa, pure awareness, the deepest foundational level of them all, although nothing needs to be added to what's called beginningless and endless, basis Rigpa. Nevertheless, these qualities aren't functioning now at their full capacity. Why? Because the obscuring factor of dumbfoundedness, and they're saying bedazzlement, has been simultaneously arising with it, also without beginning. Dumbfoundedness is, and I want to say this for my friend. Yeah, this is at studybuddhism.com, and it's the Berzin archives, but they do say that they're Kagyu here. Well, it says Tibetan Buddhism. Let's see if I can find it again. I'm not sure if they said that at this site or not. Oh, it looks like I lost my place. In any event, they go into mind training. There's a whole link for it here. Okay. Okay, they'll discuss mandalas, mantras as tools, and initiation as a tool. Tantric practice, and they're referring to tantric practice really as a tool we all possess. Instead of battling against emotions like attachment and anger, Tantra techniques enable us to transform negativities into aids for achieving enlightenment. Okay. I think advanced Buddhists will have a very sophisticated understanding of what is meant by attachment. Before entering CUT, I had a lot of positive experiences with religion. I wasn't, fortunately for me, I was not one of the, I'm not a person who was, well, I can't say that I wasn't abused by religion, because I was abused by religion, but later on into my adulthood, and very bad circumstances, but it wasn't really the church itself. It was the church unlawfully interacting with the state and a social services organization, which ended up being profoundly perilous. But early on, as growing up as a child, I didn't feel really abused or mistreated by religion, which enabled me. I have huge issues with government, of course, but that enabled me to open up to Buddhism. When I was a teenager and also in my early 20s, I knew a little bit about it. But one thing, and I think that it's because I entered the wrong way and I didn't start following a really great teacher like the Dalai Lama right away. I was rather reading diffusely in a lot of different fields. I want to clear the air about my quote unquote hang-ups with Buddhism, some of which might just be pure misconception on my part, which I'm willing to take the damage for all of that. But it's like when people say that a problem with Christianity, right, you go to Christianity, you go to some Christian churches, and you're like, well, I can't really stand it here because it's so bigoted, or it's so, I'm not sure, or I feel that nothing really matters if I'm not Jesus even, or I never personally had that response, but I can see where that would be vexatious to people. And I know a lot of people who are agnostic who really struggle with Christianity because they don't understand it or it's not useful to them. My problem with Buddhism has to do with attachment and quote unquote letting go. I don't know that. I think that advanced Buddhists understand that it's not attachment in all senses of the word, because we do have to have some degree of attachment. I don't think it's possible to let go of all of one's preferences and attachment and so forth, but I think that there are damaging forms of attachment that need to be overcome. But it's like with ego, but they say ego is also a problem. Ego and attachment are both problems. Right, that's true as well. But for me, as an individual seeker, as a very religious devotee, a religious scholar, those are psychological stumbling blocks for me when I entered Buddhism. So I really have to temper my study of Buddhism with the understanding that you can still have an ego, and you can still have attachments and so forth. I think part of that might have to do with my own history coming up through the Stygian depths of the universe when I was younger and didn't have as much attainment. And of course, I still struggle. I know a lot of people who still struggle. And we all, as I said, we're all trying to conclude samsara. But right, attachment. I don't know. I'm not sure why. When someone says you can't have attachments, I guess I'm just reminded of deprivation. And I think that to overcome that, first of all, I'm not sure that they should even use the term attachment. There might be a better word for it in another language. But it's really what they mean is negative attachments. And for instance, having negative emotions all the time can be addictive and can be self-indulgent and something that one chooses to do, whether or not that individual seeker understands that it's personally harmful. So that's an attachment, I suppose. And true, like your attachment to the material world is not always going to provide you with enlightenment or open your heart to love and so forth. So when people talk about Christianity and the stumbling blocks with Christianity, sure, I have a laundry list too, but I could overcome them because I was raised Christian, and so I was weekly confronted with all sorts of inaccurate views about Jesus or improper implementations of Christian principles. And I could see early on, okay, well, 70% of this is going to have to go right into the garbage can, and then the rest of it I'll take forward with me. And of course, I ended up taking my Catholicism after I had segued into astrology and Wicca for a number of years, and going into CUT with that early foundational understanding that some of this Christianity stuff is wrong, but it doesn't mean that you're not Christian. With Buddhism, what I took from it when I was having a lot of engaging in a lot of self-directed inquiries was, I can't handle the fact that I can't have an ego, and I can't handle the fact that I can't have attachments, and all of that has to be tempered, presumably. Maybe some Buddhists do think it's all about attachment and trying to reach the state of neutrality. I'm not sure that that's the goal, and I don't know that that's what is being proposed here. All I'm saying is all the paths have their own problems. All the Orthodox churches and all have their own particular set of issues. For me, that was the stumbling block in Buddhism. But again, it's tempered by the fact that I am able to return to Christianity when I arrive at those psychological barriers or language barriers. And ultimately, I think it really is about language. One hopes that it is. But letting go, that's a tough one. I've had experiences with what I call Om moments, where I'll write about it in a book, or I'll make a separate video about it. I think I'd like to write a chapter about it in a book on Buddhism. I don't want to get into it right now because I think that there's a lot of people who have a lot of personal trauma, who are witnessing trauma, can benefit from my information, but I think it really needs to be the whole story, and I don't know that I want to undertake to explain it here, but suffice it to say that there's a point you reach in a crisis where you don't know how the crisis is going to resolve itself, and you don't know what your options will be if it goes in one direction or the other direction. And in those moments, I found myself experiencing what I refer to as Om. I don't think people should be so bereft spiritually that they reach the points that I reach. Let me just admit to that, or not even admit to it, because it's not something that I'm causing. It's just a fact of nature and reality that I've been in that position. And in holding the Sacred Heart for other people, what I want to have happen, I think that this is the Bodhisattva view as well. I don't want people to go through the pain that I endured. And I think that's the enlightened, evolved approach to religion and spirituality. You went through something horrible when you were 16 years old. You don't want your friends to go through that. You don't want children you know to go through that. You endeavor to protect people from your loss, effectively, the experience, having to undergo the experience of your loss. So Buddhism has helped me, I suppose, in that respect, in that at some point it is about letting go, and about, as I stated in another video, about a return to normalcy that will eventually occur because it's the natural order of things. That's I think what people really need is stability, and what people need in these groups, these religious groups, and even political groups periodically, is a stable environment in which they're not reduced to not knowing. But they'll reach if you reach a point where you don't know or you can't know, then the Om, I think, will at least provide you with the possibility that it is so beyond your realm of control that it is about pure God and the pure unfoldment, and maybe even pain or pending pain has nothing to do with you ultimately, and so on. But the goal, when I realize that I've been in that position, I realize that's a possibility. And I think when I see it, even when I see religious groups forming, I look and see, why is this happening? Even though everybody has the right, and everybody has the right to benefit from religion, I often wonder, why is it that people are suffering, and what exactly is going on here? And I think that Buddhist leaders should be made available to people who are in crisis moments as well, so that people can withstand the uncertainty. But it troubles me deeply that anybody would have to go through what I went through. But I can remember, it's immaterial what the situation was, but just thinking and trying to accept the fact that I was not in control, trying to accept the fact that I literally was not in control. A black thing could happen, a white thing could happen. Door number 1 could open, door number 2 could open, and you don't know. And sometimes, as I stated, I think that is deficient. I think that means that the community has failed. If you put a child in a position, or a child finds himself or herself in a position of that much fear and uncertainty, it's problematic. But to survive it, I remember resorting to Buddhism in that particular moment. So we'll talk a little bit more about that down the line. But I think that releasing, in certain instances, releasing your attachment to the outcome can be profoundly helpful, or even moderately helpful, or a little helpful, at which point you're able to survive in the moment long enough for there to be resolution, and so on. So I'm not sure if this is Dzogchen anymore. Ravages of karma. This is interesting because it sort of ties into what I was just discussing. We're talking about Kala Chakra, which means cycle of time. Okay, cycles of time, plural, is a Buddhist system of practice from the highest class of Tantra. Its aim is to free ourselves, it says, from the ravages of karma as they play out over cycles of time, and to gain enlightenment for the benefit of all. His Holiness the Dalai Lama often confers the Kala Chakra initiation at large gatherings as a way to promote world peace. So, time is interesting. Now, okay, coming back to Dzogchen a little bit. Mahamudra. And they are saying Mahayana here. Mahamudra and Dzogchen are advanced Mahayana Buddhist practices emphasizing meditation on the innate, pure nature of the mind. This is interesting because my friend who is Kagyu initiated talks a lot about the mind and questions and concerns relating to all things to do with the mind. Here, Mahamudra and Dzogchen are advanced Mahayana Buddhist practices emphasizing meditation on the innate pure nature of the mind, practiced on the basis of extensive preliminaries and with the guidance of a qualified teacher. Meditators come to recognize and uncover ever deeper levels of mind. In the end, they discover the mind's true nature. Having fully trained in compassion and wisdom, they attain enlightenment for the fullest benefit of others. So Christians will relate to that. And I think that's one intersection where Christianity and Buddhism have a very vital point of commonality. And I want to go to mind rolling for you right now because there is a professor from Amherst College who has a lot of first-hand exposure to the mind rolling lineage. Okay, and I'm looking at a picture of Khandro Rinpoche right now. And that video discusses mind training in Buddhism. And you can look at that at Study Buddhism. Do a search for it on the web and you'll find it. But let me tell you about the mind rolling lineage. Okay, it's also known as Palden Nyorik. And CUT people will like this. Popular Tibetan legend says that this lineage descended from the celestial devas. Okay, it is thus one of the La Rig Deva family lineages of Tibet. I'm going to go to, there's Mindrolling International and there's mindrolling.org, and I'm going to .org right now. Okay, and the lineage continues to this day through direct descendants, and there's an active lineage, and I think that they're around the 11th or 13th generation at this juncture. Chogyal Lingpa established the Ogmin mind-rolling monastery in 1646. So the mind-rolling monastery goes back to the 17th century. Traditionally, there are three types of lineages in Tibetan Buddhism. Reincarnation lineage, such as that of Tulkus. Disciple lineage, such as that of Topoa, Naropa, Marpa, and Milarepa, and family lineage. The family or the blood lineage is the one in which the next head of the lineage is the child of the lineage holder. And then it goes into different branches of that. In Tibetan Buddhism. All members of the excerpts now. All members of the mind-rolling lineage have been known for their contributions in establishing and propagating the Dharma. Some of the most exceptional individuals amongst them were. There's a whole list of teachers, but what I want to know is what it means to propagate Dharma. That's basically that's how they summarize it. It's the propagation of Dharma through embodied living masters that are either reincarnating. Well, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure if it says lineages in Tibetan Buddhism. It doesn't say mind rolling specifically. So, but we'll find out. We'll find out a little bit more about it. Rinpoche. Mind rolling through 50 years. Family photos. Tulkus, I believe, are reincarnated. These include activities in this final section of the Mind Rolling book, okay? You may view photos of a wide variety of people and events at Mind Rolling Monastery, that's what it's called, Mind Rolling Monastery, beginning in 1965 and up to the present day, 2015. These include activities, sadhanas, rituals, great masters, rinpoches, tulkus, monks, staff, and Mind Rolling family photos. Alright. It's hard to get to the meat of... There's a Padmasambhava statue here. A stupa. Great piece. Stupa. I think I might be swearing. I might be swearing in Yiddish if you want to know the truth. The way I initially pronounced that, but okay. So, how to pronounce stupa? Watch later. Let's hear it. Okay. Mind rolling in India, the early days. Okay, mind rolling today. Shrine room. Interesting. 4 immeasurables. Life force tree and mandala. Life force tree is new to me. 4 immeasurables shrine room. I'm familiar with the tree of life. The second floor shrine room, I don't know where this is. It must be, it's the monastery in India. It's called the Lineage Shrine Room. It's also known as the 4 Immeasurables Shrine Room. The second floor shrine room, known as the 4 Immeasurables or Lineage Shrine Room, is dedicated to the great lineage holders throughout the history of mind rolling. Within it are murals and statues depicting the descendants of the Dharma King of mind rolling. In addition to this are the paintings of precious lineage masters of the Pratimoksha, Bodhisattvayana, and Vajrayana. All three. And it's quite a colorful collection of statues, and on the back you can see icons, and there are halos that are different colors. So unlike Christianity, where the halos are basically yellow, which is appropriate as since the top chakra is the father, and the point of the father like descending, and is the thousand-petaled lotus, and is associated with the color yellow. Here we have red halos, green halos, blue halos. I don't know if there's a significance or not. Life force tree and mandala. Okay, the base of the stupa holds the life force tree. It is filled with precious relics and dharanis. I'm receiving a lot of information. There are a lot of uh, jivas coming in and out, evidently, are disembodied spirits, um, either inspired or agitated by all of this. Relics and dharanis, and on the walls are painted the images of the 1,000 Buddhas of the good Kalpa. In it are also the statues of the field of accumulation of the Adazabdon Nyingpo, from the extraordinary tradition revealed by the embodiment of the collection of all qualities of the three secrets of all the victorious Sugatas. And then they're listing uh, Terdag Lingpa. Furthermore, it contains the 4 kinds of relics, numerous extraordinary dharanis, and various old and sacred statues in the form of wisdom deities. A 3-dimensional mandala based on Minling Vajrasattva has also been constructed. This mandala is wondrously detailed and glorious to behold. The life force tree is in accordance with the mandala within the tradition of Drimed Namyi. So, esoteric information to be certain, but interesting to behold. The Shakyamuni Shrine Room. Wow. Peerless teacher, okay? Capital P, capital T. Peerless teacher, the Buddha Shakyamuni. The first floor shrine room is dedicated to our peerless teacher, the Buddha Shakyamuni. On the walls are painted the principal figures of the Buddhas of the 3 times, beginning from the right side of the principal figures. All around on the walls are painted the Jataka stories based on the text Wish-Fulfilling Tree written by the Dharma King, Shemendra. These beautiful murals are painted with great attention to detail. On the pillars are the 16 great arhats, the 7 entrusted with the teachings of the 17 Panditas of glorious Nalanda. That's the Shakyamuni Shrine Room. Okay, there's college. I want to read more exactly about Dharma. I want to read more specifics about the Dharma King. Okay, this is a little bit more detail. I'm not sure if this is my friend's organization or not. I'm not sure if this is technically considered Kagyu or not. And Rinpoche could be a term used on multiple Buddhist paths as well. But they're referring to Nyagir Nyingma College, the Institute of Advanced Buddhist Studies at Mindrolling. The profound teachings of the Buddha say that ultimate happiness is achieved through the unsurpassable enlightenment. To this end, advanced Buddhist studies is deemed necessary for the preservation of the precious living lineage and spread of the vast and profound Buddha Dharma for the benefit of all sentient beings. All relative and ultimate happiness of sentient beings results through the understanding of the interdependency of cause and effect and from the cultivation of virtuous and abandonment of non-virtuous actions. To preserve the unbroken lineage of teachings and pass them on to the next generation of practitioners, Nyagir Nyingma College, also known as Five Sciences University, was established. It is now one of the largest Buddhist institutes in existence. And then too many complex names to really list here. But some of these leaders are referred to as omniscient, part of a living lineage. Which, when they say living lineage, I'm not sure if omniscient is a title of respect, or if they're referring to people who used to have embodiment. Omniscient wrong sound. Let me see if I can find that. They refer to the omniscient, the Buddha's omniscient mind. Interesting. This is interesting. The Buddha said that no being, human or divine, can be all-knowing, according to this one source. Omniscience is the ability to know everything and is usually believed to be an attribute of God, although there have been religious leaders who have claimed to be omniscient too. The Buddha said that no being, human or divine, can be all-knowing. He denied that God is omniscient, for if he were, religion would become meaningless. I have said and taught that God is not all-powerful. Independent of this, although I certainly recognize, well, I mean, I have said that independent of reading this about omniscience. My belief is God is all-loving. God is all-loving, ultimately wants perfection, ultimately strives for perfection, strives for perfect manifestation, and strives to protect humanity and love humanity. But the reality is, look around you, it doesn't happen the way that it's supposed to unfold. Look at the loss in your life. Look at people who have suffered extreme loss for no evident reason. Yeah, you could say that has to do with reincarnation. You could also say, or maybe even admit, that it's really that God didn't get there in time. And maybe that is where human agency must be brought up to its fullest potential, and that's my belief. So when an atheist says to me, why did the Holocaust happen? Why did a massacre somewhere in the U.S., a gun massacre that, one of the ones that we read about on a daily basis, why did this happen if God loves humanity? God wasn't the one who did that, for starters. Secondly, it could be that God didn't know. That's my belief, is that God is not all-powerful. He's all-loving. What they're saying here is that he's not all-knowing, which is similar to all-powerful, I suppose, because you'd have to know in order to intervene. What they're saying here is that God doesn't always know, which, to me, that provides comfort, right? As opposed to the Christian model, where God is all-powerful, and ergo, if your land is blighted or your fields won't grow or your children die, that's really something to do with a test, a quote unquote test. I don't accept that. I don't accept that we're being tested in that way. When I see the pain of a child, I don't accept that it's a test from God. I think that it is God. I don't think it has anything to do with God. I think that God, in some instances, I think that Helios and Vesta, when they started things up here, were maybe acting at the direction of Alpha and Omega, but the power, the Elohim, or the entities that should have been providing better guideposts, were either asleep at the wheel, not present, or couldn't get there in time. That's my theory, right? And so it is human agency. Yes, it's through the proper execution of Jewish principles, Hindu principles, and so forth. But to blame God because we suffer is not always helpful. And I think it's important to understand that. So the Buddha and omniscience. What I couldn't find here was a definition of what it means to be omniscient as an honorific. Right, the current leader of one of the newest schools, it says, is the 14th Dalai Lama. Buddhists revere Buddha since he developed many of the premises and teachings of Buddhism, but this is not worship. Worship requires a deity, and Buddhism has none. And see, that's great. That's fantastic. And I'm sure incredibly helpful as a thought form. For me, people talk about guru worship or guru yoga. That's part of my path. Is I'm not fearful in saying that I revere, and I think that the Kagyus understand that as well. I'm not fearful in revering another person. It's not that It's not that I failed somehow. It's not that I'm being suckered or lured. It's that I've studied the situation. I know that this person has wisdom that I cannot find elsewhere. And I know that that wisdom, the transmission of that wisdom, is enhanced by my treating that individual reverentially. So mother to me, not just a teacher, but a holy woman. A holy woman with a special place. And when I preserve that through the practice known as Guru Yoga, also Bhakti Yoga, it's also the development of your heart through the veneration, really, of a guru. It it is the right path if it is assisting your development. That's as much as I can say about it. But I would never consider myself to be not a practitioner of Guru Yoga. It's central. It's definitely central to what it is that I do. So when I'm a little bit sad for people who say that they don't understand it and they think that it's all cult of personality. I mean, in a way, it's cult of personality because you have so much affection. It is a personal affection as well. Bhakti yoga, I love Mother like oh it, well, I can't really. It would take me a long time to explain the different ways. It's her wisdom too. It's also her maternal demeanor. It's also her ultimate nature, and it is also interpersonal as well. And balancing those is part of it, it's a puzzle, to figure out, and it's a gift to unwrap as well. And yeah, you have to have the right perspective on it, and you have to have, you have to be engaging that sort of yoga in the proper manner for it to be effective. But that is known as Guru Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga is really when you're developing the heart as well. But deity, yeah, so she's more like but at CUT, see, I think it's okay to see someone as being like a living embodiment of a god or a goddess. And I mean, we refer to Mother as Goddess Maru now. I don't see the harm in that. I suppose to me there are a lot more harmful things to do in the world than to say that someone's wisdom is so all-encompassing for you that it's worthy of veneration. You know, so I don't fully understand it when people talk about idol worship and cult of personality. I mean, I understand what that means, and I'm opposed. As I said, I'm opposed to force any sort of coercive activity. But I think if you have a very strong religious leader who can motivate the development of your heart, you should go for it. So worship requires a deity, and Buddhism has none. So we are different from typical Buddhism in that we believe in God at CUT. And let's see here. The Buddha, and they're saying Gautama Siddhartha is a spiritual leader but not a god, and to us, he really is a kind of god. So that's different too. That is different because we refer to, as I said, we refer to God and Goddess Meru, God Tabor, God of Gold. So these are gods, and Siddhartha Gautama to us is pivotal. One of the founders of the church, for starters. Secondly, is an ascended master. And ascended masters are really basically at the same level of Jesus. So, not just a quote-unquote spiritual leader, although that doesn't mean that we wouldn't use that as a thought form, I think, at certain junctures. But let me see if I can find a little bit more about Karma Kagyu. Okay, so see, Wikipedia says something a little bit different. Right, and their head is not the Dalai Lama, but rather the Karmapa. The spiritual head of the Karma Kagyu is the Gyalwa Karmapa. The 2nd through 10th Karmapas were principal spiritual advisors to successive emperors of China. And I wanted to make sure that Rob knows this. The Karma Kagyu are sometimes called the Black Hat Lamas. Okay, that's reserved for. They're called the Black Hats or the Black Caps, and that's reserved for, or rather, the Black Crowns, which is actually the Black Crown is worn by the Karmapa. That's where Black Hat Lamas comes from. And then here I see that it's a sub-school of the Kagyu. The Karma Kagyu itself is a sub-school of the Kagyu tradition and is named after its founder, the Karmapa. It began in Tibet in the 12th century with the first Karmapa. He was the disciple of Gampopa in the 11th and 12th centuries. And then there's a whole write-up about the lineage. They trace their origins to Shakyamuni through Marpa, the great translator, who 3 times traveled to India to bring back authentic Buddhist teachings to Tibet. Okay, that's interesting. Marpa's teacher, Naropa, received the lineage transmission from Tilopa and so on back to the Buddha himself. Marpa's most famous student was the greatest yogi in all of Tibet, the renowned Jetsun Milarepa, who passed the teachings on to Gampopa, who in turn transmitted the teachings of the first Karmapa, Dusam Kyanpa. Since then, the Kagyu lineage has been headed by a succession of reincarnations of the Gyalwang Karmapa. The line of the Karmapas is said to be, all of this is subject to verification, but this is coming from, they have the Great Wheel at the top, and it's a very well-maintained page. They've got a couple of, it looks like Dachshunds at the top of their page. Dogs, but they look like Dachshunds. It's interesting. The line of the Karmapas is said to be self-announced because each incarnation leaves a letter predicting his next rebirth. All great Kagyu teachers regard His Holiness Karmapa as the embodiment and source of all of the blessings of the lineage. Please follow the links below to learn more about the origins of Buddhism and the Karma Kagyu lineage specifically. There's a link to the Heart Disciples, the Marpa Kagyu, the Karmapas, Shakyamuni, Buddhism of India, and then Buddhism in Tibet. I want to see what the Heart Disciples is. Oh, fascinating. There's one of them. I'll be stumbling over. I mean, people don't want me to get hung up on pronunciation, but I'm incredibly self-conscious, and I shouldn't be, because you should be able to just proceed, of course, but I always want to hit it at the right time in the most authentic manner the first time. Sometimes that's entirely impractical, and it actually is counterproductive to attempt to undertake that. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you lack attainment because you can't speak a native tongue, but it can be a barrier. I remember at one point I made the error of saying Rinpoche, which sounds French, and it is, when you read the word, it looks French even. And I have a French background, and that's what I thought it was, but it's actually Rinpoche. And it's not only, I think it's both, it's titular, and I also think that I think that it might be a surname as well. I'm not quite sure, but I know that it is titular. Let me see. I'll show you. Let's see if I can. I think that it means basically the same thing as Karmapa, or it means teacher, perhaps. Let's take a look. Yeah, I'm at the wrong place to try to dig that out. Oh, let's go. Advertisements for cellular phones. Okay, so let's see here. Right, Rinpoche. In Tibetan Buddhism, an incarnate lama, or highly respected religious teacher, often used as an honorific title. Right. Lion's Roar says that it's an honorific used for important teachers in the Tibetan tradition. It literally means precious jewel. When a teacher is called Rinpoche, it usually means they are a tulku who has been recognized as the reincarnation of a prominent master. He, and rarely she, is trained from childhood in Buddhist study, practice, and ritual, and takes over certain responsibilities. It goes on. Abuse allegations. There's so many abuse allegations in all of the religions. It gets tedious to hear about it all the time. Who knows what is true and all of that. Although people should be taken seriously. I should add that proviso as well. Sometimes I think that the religious leaders are targets. I don't think that Nityananda, I shouldn't, give people carte blanche just because they're religious, and I'm not saying that should happen. I do think that reports of abuse need to be believed. I don't want to be the person who comes out to say that you can just gloss over all of that at all. But periodically it's inaccurate, which is too bad, because people who really do need help, you might know some of those people don't receive it if there are a lot of false allegations out there. So that's an obvious statement, but So this particular Rinpoche, they're saying, at this one site, which is also professionally done and obviously uh, formally proctored, they say that he possesses a rare ability to present the ancient wisdom of Tibet in a fresh, engaging manner. His profound yet accessible teachings and playful sense of humor have endeared him to students around the world. Most uniquely, Rinpoche's teachings weave together his own personal experiences with modern scientific research. And they're talking about a man named Mingyur, and it's a meditation community, and the program is called Turgar. Modern scientific research relating both to the practice of meditation. He's 3 years younger than I am, and he spent many years of his childhood in strict retreat. At the age of 17, he was invited to be a teacher at his monastery's 3-year retreat center, a position rarely held by such a young lama. He also completed the traditional Buddhist training in philosophy and psychology before founding a monastic college at his home monastery in North India. I'm receiving a lot of information from Pema right now. I don't know why. Who is a Buddhist contemplative and an American Tibetan Buddhist and an ordained nun, right? And acharya, they call them. Acharyas. And disciple of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. And I have benefited a lot from interacting with her, to my surprise. Because, as I stated, like when you're first initiated, I think that your eyes are opened one time, at least in my experience. I think that I suppose I humbly consider myself to be in the theosophical lineage beginning with Madame Blavatsky, and most recently ending with Elizabeth Clare Prophet. And you're only as stated, you're only initiated once. Sure, I might follow Sadhgurunath periodically, or sit in a prayer session, or attend a darshan with another holy leader, but I'll never see beyond Mother. It doesn't make sense to have to do that if you're only really baptized once. And it's like, as I said, it's like dealing with Babaji if you're Yogi Raj. But with Pema Chodron, yeah, it's like I was so caught up in the Summit Lighthouse and just on my path all the time that I reached a point where I was very frustrated at some juncture, and she issued a book or a teaching, a course where I could take parts of it for free, called, I think it's called The Freedom to Choose Something Different. So when I was talking to you before about Om, the power of Om, and as I stated, some people should be it breaks my heart when some people have to resort to extreme forms of mental gymnastics in order to overcome pain and fear in the moment. But if you're at a point where you just can't function, sometimes Buddhism is the best recourse. So I think when she came on the scene to offer a change of pace, it was very liberating for me personally. Even though it's not like I spent hours upon hours as I did with Elizabeth Clare Prophet, it's a couple hours on with her information can agitate your system enough and your brain enough to let certain negative thought forms break free, and that can be a very vital lesson and tool. I have a couple of friends who are going to be very impatient with me for doing this, but um, peeing my children, right? They want me to record it. I don't want to record it right now. I'd rather hear what Kadrin. That's not what they're saying here about it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so see what Bill Moyers says. So there's an interview with her, okay, that goes on for, I think it was like half an hour at least, or maybe even an hour, fear and fearlessness. So she's addressing the issue of fear as well. Copyright Bill Moyers. Pema Chodron is what they're saying there, okay? What to do when you lose it completely. And it's actually her, the Buddhist nun, sitting there discussing that with you, sitting in a chair, okay? It's short. If you want to cut directly to it, it's sponsored by the Omega Institute, and please take a look at it if you need to do so. Let go and be free. And is that the freedom to choose something different? No, but it's the noble journey from fear to fearlessness. So this is a huge topic with her. Relaxing with impermanence. Buddhists kill me sometimes. They just do. Okay, so, and she's on Oprah. Okay. Okay, I think she's eager for me to be moving on. Stopping the cycle of aggression. I'm sure that's fantastic too. Um, okay, and I want to see where Rob is. Why? So now people are upset that I'm moving on. Or, okay, I'm not on the Karmapas specifically right now. I think that threw some people off here. What's going on here in a practice group? Okay, this guy has his own community. Dual living, path of liberation, mind rolling. That's pretty fascinating. So, Dharma, right? It's the people who are bringing you Dharma, and it's a gift to be able to hang out with that information and to be a witness to progressive revelation. I don't think they use these terms in Buddhism, but maybe they do in some instances. That's where I think it's interesting to bring in Christianity, because it's culturally familiar to a lot of people, and it will help enhance the understanding of Buddhism. I do understand the desire to keep those religions separate to an extent, because codification is relevant and important. And important. You don't go to a Buddhist satsang or a Hindu satsang with the expectation of reading a lot of Jewish mysticism or studying Sufism. You go with the expectation, including chakra preparation, a certain set of thought forms, and so on, that you're going to be following the path with which you're acclimated. So that's why when people come to me and tell me, my mother does this to me all the time, and I'm sure other people's mothers say and do the same thing. Why don't you go to church? I want to say, Mom, I'm in holy orders at Church Universal and Triumphant. It is the one consistent thing in my reality. I'm an ordained minister. why are you trying to drag me to Catholic Church all the time? And really what she's saying is she wants something else to be happening for me in the moment. She's not suggesting that I abandon my religion. But what people, I think, don't understand sometimes is that it's important to cling. They talk about attachment. What I think shouldn't be promoted in all of that is the notion that you don't have preferences. Of course you have preferences. Of course you've been down a path. Of course you understand chronology and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think attachment. That's a topic for a separate conversation. But Roman Catholicism, for instance, or Pentecostalism, or a class on Kabbalism is not going to satisfy you necessarily if you're expecting to have a conversation about Buddhist principles. So it's important that those unique flavors are preserved for individuals, and that an individual's life path within the context of the unfoldment of the religion is acknowledged and respected. And what's magical to me about CUT is that the unfoldment occurs, it's as if God or the masters or some mystical hand or force were handing you individual sutras deliberately over the course of time for reasons known only to the unseen force. And it doesn't stop. Since I entered the church, it's never stopped being a point of fascination for me, that it's still unfolding. So, in other words, my friend in Michigan might have all sorts of information about Padmasambhava. I don't really know. What I know is that Padmasambhava was the sponsor of Elizabeth Clare Prophet, ergo is extremely important. So I know when I go to Buddhism, the next time I open a book on Buddhism, it'll be directly to Padmasambhava to study who he was, what it means, and so on. Whereas my friend might have a lot of other information, but he's also doing Naropa Yoga and all these other things with which I have very little familiarity. It's for a reason, you see. It's because I have a specific set of it's not cultural needs, I have a specific life path. I'm being pulled in a specific direction. He's being pulled in his own direction, in his own development with different information. And you will find when you come into CUT or re-engage CUT, or you already know from having studied under Mother, that that information is relevant, engaging. Of course, you have to hit your stride. You can't get the book in the mail or listen to a couple of tapes and put it aside. You could do that, in fact. And I think that there are many people, well, I know practitioners of white forms of occultism who I think have a very casual relationship with Church Universal and Triumphant, where they can read about the Violet Flame and be interested and then move on. Whereas for people, I think, who are deeply rooted in CUT, the Violet Flame becomes one of the centerpieces and one of the continuous points of departure and reference. So it really is what you make of it. But if you let yourself go down that path, first of all, the proper unfoldment will never be destructive. Okay? It'll only, if you are doing it the right way, it'll only ever enhance what you're doing. Sure, there are times periodically when you have to put religion aside, or you want to, or you benefit from doing so. If I wake up in the morning and I had been oriented to doing a lot of math, or wanted to be, well, I might not start studying the Tulkus directly out of the gate. I might really actually have to do the math and say I'm going to putting the unfoldment aside for a minute, or the CUT aside for a while in order to do that. But I think that for a lot of people, myself, I really do believe that the preferred unfoldment is within the church. And I believe that were I able to engage this effectively 100% of the time, it would be beneficial for many, many, many people. So the goal is maybe to have it front and center. But the point, it should be practical to do that as well. I believe that. I think religion, the pursuit of religion and pursuing the proper unfoldment and experiencing it should be attainable. And it should be that one can subsist, including personally, financially, socioeconomically, and so forth. Through religion. I believe that that is absolutely reasonable to expect. But sometimes you do put it aside. What I found was that what wasn't useful in my pursuit of improving the world and my take on what it means to be a bodhisattva, it's not useful to use the church as a scapegoat. And let me put this into context for you. So, let's speak in terms of the media spectacle, if you will, that is Church Universal and Triumphant. So we speak about if you're in love with the church and you're in the church and you have all sorts of church people and friends around you, then it's just this wonderful, engaging, wonderful vessel for self-fulfillment. It is an interesting point of departure that you can have with new friends. You develop friendships within it, and so on. And it's beautiful. It's the diamond shining mind of God. You know, to have it, to be able to grasp it, and to, as I said, participate in that, in the step-by-step unfoldment where you're being presented with this incredible galvanizing information. But what we say, of course, is that, well, Elizabeth went out into the middle of the countryside and bought all this property and then started building bomb shelters, etc., 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 and all the disappointment and disasters that ensued, which are either true or they're not true. My belief is that very few people experienced loss at the hands of Elizabeth Clare Prophet, exceedingly few people, and many, many, many people benefited from her reality and her work and so on. But we like to talk about it in terms of it being destructive, right? Which is a Shiva impulse, I suppose, destroying Shiva. And in a way, Mother was like destroying Shiva because, yes, she ended certain cycles. Certain things had to end. It was the world and the government was too damaging to too many people for her not to take a foothold and start implementing that Shiva power. Through that energizing change comes beneficial transformation. So that's the reality. There's a difference between reality and how we use language to represent reality. Getting back to my point about whether or not a church is actually destructive. And the accompanying point, which is my effort to improve conditions for humanity and conditions for people, for qualifying people, if you will, considering that the fallen angels really cannot be saved during this round. Is it destructive? It's destructive in a Shiva sense in some respects, I suppose, to say no more of this, that building needs to come down, these people need to be moved, this is not appropriate to be doing this to this setup, all that. Well, that destroys certain institutions, certainly, but it needs to happen for there to be beneficial change. You can't have the growth without there being the change, which is the change associated with Shiva. So what I find in church, and also being a litigant, being involved in court battles, is that the children and the grandchildren, I've seen the children, certain of the children of the prophets have publicly stated their problems with the church, and also speak in terms of the perception around the problems and so forth. I respect that because they have the right to their opinion. It's not like they're not speaking out of experience, and most of it is based in good scholarship and so on. But to say that Mother is the cause, or that it's a destructive cult, sometimes saying that might be helpful in certain instances, I suppose, because it represents the problem that is destruction. But to me, as someone who is in court, it's not the church that I would attack. And by that I mean, it's not just preferential that I would say, no, I'm not going to attack CUT because I prefer in my heart not to do that. It's that it's impractical to turn your ire towards the church. It doesn't make sense from the standpoint of moving one thing in front of the other. So when I say to you that normally the teaching is only going to provide a blessing to you, I've never known the teaching to be destructive. What I have known in the moment is periodically you'll wake up. You want to teach or study with Guru Ma for 7 or 8 hours, but you also have an hour or two of other work that you have to do. And for that one, because you're in a different mindset for those couple of hours, you commit to doing that and not studying religion. But I've never found the CUT path, when I'm on that path, to be anything other than a form of sustenance, support for myself personally, and engagement of the ability to support other people. That's why I know that it's authentic. So when people, but as a litigant, I would never, even though I have problems with the church, or I'll look at what some other people are saying about me, or I'll see an opinion with which I disagree coming out of the ranch, I don't think of it in terms of it being actionable in that moment as a civil problem. Because if I personally switch gears, and maybe people are elsewhere, I don't think that's the case. However, I think that if I switched gears away from the people who had truly done me harm, which had no association with CUT whatsoever, at least not in this. Some of those people could very well have been enemies of CUT, and I believe that is the case, if you want to know the truth. But attacking the church has never been helpful to me, even when there's a civil problem. It's too much of a distraction to try to say, I'm going to shift all of my gears now and focus on correcting every last thing that's wrong at the ranch. Why? Because it's really already been addressed. Because we're all on the Bodhisattva path simultaneously. So my anger and frustration with the ranch can be addressed by changing my own mindset with regard to it, because everyone else is going to catch up with my will and preferences, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's funny because I try at one point, I remember thinking to myself, why are they talking about, for instance, the Mo lawsuit all the time, as opposed to more recent lawsuits and more recent forms of loss and more recent legal problems experienced by people in the church that were much more destructive than anything to do with Mo? But when I start to get angry about that, I find that it's entirely pointless, because the people in the church have already expressed, I think, an awareness that whatever is being said and done is just it's part of the not part of the foundation. It's part of the sediment sort of forming at the delta, if you will. It's the delta that forms at the end of the river. In a way, it's a natural process. I'm not sure why I'm using that as an image, but that's how I feel about it. For some reason, it's a fertile valley. Yeah, it's nature. You know, there's infighting and there are problems. Yes, but ultimately it is the Garden of Eden, and ultimately it is abundant and loving and adaptable, and will unfold you if you want it to, and so forth. And I can't picture ever divorcing myself from it, and I know people who claim not to be in it anymore, but I wonder sometimes if they, I don't know, I suppose people may have shifted entirely out of it, and now they're Nichiren, or entirely following they're Baptist now. I have no idea. But I can't personally relate to it. Sure, I don't think that everybody necessarily is geared up to be in holy orders either. But I would just say it's really not, in my view, if you were to ask me what to focus on, and you were in Church Universal and Triumphant, or if you cared about me and you wanted to follow my legal problem to its proper conclusion, right, I would never shift gears and say, let's sue the church. It wouldn't make sense to me. And it's not only that it would be ugly to me personally or counterproductive for me to do that, it doesn't make sense because the people within the church have, their hearts are full, and they're even if they're flawed, or even if they're, everybody's flawed, but I mean, even if their viewpoints are not fully evolved or not where I want them to be, they're still, their hearts are full and they are family, and it doesn't make sense to attack one's family under those circumstances. It makes sense to stay on the path of going after the governmental ogres and the monsters who are trying to run the country. So when I look at Aaron Prophet's work, my response to it generally is that I believe that um, it, that it's not that she badmouths the church, it's that she tries to represent it in a light that is familiar to people. That light, however, is negative in many instances. That's just the fact of reality. Does it mean she shouldn't be having that discussion? I don't think it means that at all. But it does mean I think that she utilizes conversations about the church in order to shed light on other topics, and that is appropriate under certain circumstances. Not everybody is going to agree with her at all times, but it does open up a field of dialogue to engage the history of the church in a manner that promotes debate. I'll leave it at that. But right, yeah, I shifted gears one day, and it's funny, and I'm so blessed to be friends with like the children and the grandchildren online, and their viewpoints are fascinating. And at one point, I remember getting really angry about the Mull lawsuit at some point because I had so many bigger fish to fry, and so I thought, you know what, I'm going to say something to one of the legal staff or something, and one of the daughters got on. I think it was one of the daughters got online, just quote unquote coincidentally. Of course, we don't believe in coincidence, but got online to say, "Yeah, I'm working on other things right now," and I knew that it was a sign that it's pointless to attack something that you love, and even though it's imperfect, and even though it is still this beautiful golden vessel, a golden bowl, and although I suppose it is tainted by worldly viewpoints, it doesn't have to be. It can be it can be pure and perfect unto itself. One of the conversations is, well, I am people strive towards perfectionism and how destructive that is. I support striving towards spiritual perfectionism. I do. I think that is a valid path, and of course you have to have perspective and know you're not always going to be perfect, or it's not always going to appear perfect, and so forth. But that awareness is part of the ultimate perfection, in my view. I'll leave it at that. I want to look quickly at Nichiren to provide you guys with information, or people who might be. There are all sorts of digital texts and ebooks available to you at kagyu.org. Let's see, become a member. I don't know if you have to donate to become a member. No. If you... This is the North American seat of His Holiness, the 17th Gyalwang Karmapa. It looks like, unfortunately, it's a little expensive in my world. I will mail a check in the amount owed. But you know something? Online lessons at Summit are expensive too, and I don't do those. I do holy orders for free, and of course nothing's free. I mean, to be a really good holy orders member, you have to contribute. However, to put cash up front, I'm not criticizing anybody, but I think $300 is a lot for a year for one person. But more power to people who can afford it. And I wonder if they have like a student. Yeah. Clearly, they need to have some mechanism for people to join this one particular organization that enables the indigent to participate alongside everybody else. But I'm not here to comment about that so much. When I go become a residential volunteer, well, that's interesting too. Looks like you can maybe volunteer residentially without paying all of that cash. Vegetarian meals. I have no idea, but I don't see any prohibition to doing it without paying. Green Tara. Buddha of active compassion, okay? Okay, so... Okay, so do visit them. They have a ton of links. Oh, there he is. Okay. What I liked about CUT, yeah, I mean, I donate to CUT. You know what I mean? And the involvement just increases for me based upon not paying to do online lessons. That's my experience with it. Um, and but I mean, if people have $100 to sign up and are able to contribute, it's not a lot, really. It's like, I think to stay in a quote unquote keeper, I think it's $10 a month or something like that. But you have to pay $100 initially. That's all I really know. And people are welcome to. Well, I don't want to say that because I don't want to become too embroiled in what everybody else is looking at right now. Because part of what happened when I entered the church and saw that I could reinitiate holy orders was that there was a natural bifurcation that occurred. It didn't separate me from the church. It brought me closer to the church. And yeah, I'm a keeper of the flame, technically put, because I'm a Saint Germain adherent. Um, and you don't have to take the online lessons in order to be a member of the church, not the actual quote-unquote online lessons where you're hacking into the computer and putting in your credit card. I think that though a lot of people who can afford to do that are going to benefit tremendously from that. My form of quote-unquote payment has been entirely different, and I think that's for a reason. We share information by we're able to put our information in relief by not always sharing the information automatically. In other words, it's not that there's a big secret or that you have to take a vow necessarily. Yes, you have to use discernment when deciding what to disclose and when. I do believe that, but I think it's an interesting opportunity for holy orders to help instruct keepers and vice versa, because keepers, I'm certain, are exposed to information about which I'm not yet aware. But as I stated before, my friend on studying Naropa Yoga, or Dzogchen and so on, it's not directly on my path, but he is going through what not going through. I mean, he is directing his own unfoldment by studying what is recognizable to him by way of um, appropriately supporting and pursuing thought forms that are relevant to him. So 6 great monasteries of the Nyingma tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. The Dzogchen monastery is one of 6, and it goes on and on. But Kagyu, again, is not the Dalai Lama, okay? It's the Karmapa. Oh, don't give out on me, keyboard. It won't. It's just not on. Okay, wait, so Kagyu. Right, I'm correct about that. Okay. And there he is. Oh, and there's at one point there was a pretender. There's a bifurcation. I haven't studied that yet, but at one point there was, oh, and there's a black crown. There's a picture of him in the black crown. I'll have to post this on my website. Okay, so I'll save this. That might be a sign that I wonder how long this video is. Let me just say the 17th Karmapa. Okay, that is fabulous. Alright, we're going to save that. I believe that they wear yellow undergarments and that under a maroon outer garment. And that possibly it's the Dalai Lama adherents who wear orange. I will figure that out for you. It could be that these are just his vestments as the holy leader, too. But the color definitely, there's significance there. There are pictures of Mother. I believe that they're Dalai Lama adherents and not Karmapa adherents. But it is Elizabeth Clare Prophet, everybody, who brought all these up higher level Dalai Lama adherents to the ranch, and they all had a powwow, satsang with her, around her. I have photographs. I have photographs of it. Okay, so there it is, and let's see how close I can get to evaluating what we're looking at with regard to time. I can't find what it is that I'm doing right now. Alright, so this is going to be about 2 hours in length. Let's see what else we can look at for a minute here. I don't know if I want to upload, make a giant upload where we're not able to if I upload something that's 4 hours long, we're going to be in trouble. I don't want an exclusive offer. Okay, that goes, that goes. Okay, I have a lot of email here. I am on so many spam lists. What I want to receive are, are emails from people who have legitimate questions, or I want to receive productive conversation, productive introductions and conversations, so that we can all get out of here. Which means raising money and buying property. That's the most practical solution to whatever else is going on. Zion needs to be achieved. I'm going to look up Nichiren and Pure Land before I conclude this, though, and then we can, with any luck, we can move forward together on another topic if you folks find that you have something else that you would like me to attempt to address. But let me just see if I can do that. It's hard to tell periodically as I suppose the term is psychic, right? Someone who's